Welcome to the second keynote of EXA 2020 conference, and we will start soon with our presentation, but let's start with few points that we want to highlight first. We are going to have the keynote speech by Professor Jenny Preece, which we'll hear about in a second. But the first thing that is important to note is to say a big thank you to the core conference team in the CISA Media Lab team, Enrico, Francesca, and Dorina, which are helping a lot throughout the whole conference and invested huge amount of time and effort since the conference has moved online. Also, Tim Woods worked tirelessly to work on the conference from the moment it was agreed and until now. We should thank all of them for their achievement. We also have a wide conference committee that helped through the different stages of the project, from putting out the call to deciding on the theme to evaluating the proposals and all the way to the program that you see in front of you. Those were many hours of going through different aspects and shaping the conference as it is now. In terms of also the conference, it wouldn't be possible with the different sponsors that are local, other organizations, a project like EU Citizen Science, and of course the local coffee company, Illy. I should especially, because we're going to talk in this session about citizen science theory and practice, give a shout to JCOM, the Journal of Science Communication, which Enrico is leading, and which been a really wonderful host for a fantastic set of papers on citizen science over the past few years, and gave hopefully the motivation to help us and help EXA to create this conference in Trieste. We also need to remember, as we said in the original keynote yesterday, about the need to work on inclusion all the time, and to remember that we have a safe space policy. You can find it in the link on EU Citizen Science. You can find it also on the conference website, which it's created by the Engagement and Inclusion Group with Claudia Goebel and other members. The conference itself, of course, have now a history. It's the third conference of EXA. We are now benefiting from the effort from the conference in 2016, which was our first, and we will come back to the same place later in October in the Citizen Science and Sustainable Development Goal Conference. But this conference itself started in 2018 when in Geneva, and here you see the team that created this conference. Enrico and Stefano volunteered to lead the conference. They didn't expect what they were heading for, and it wasn't just being in May and enjoying the conference, but actually the whole move online and all the challenges that presented. Some numbers for EXA 2020, we had 300 submissions, paper, which made the effort of coordinating and deciding exactly which paper will come in quite a challenge. We had 96 reviewers, well beyond the conference committee, which helped us to direct them. And I've just checked my email, and at least there were 664 emails, but I think there were much more since Lucy Robinson have sent the first email calling for members of EXA board to join the conference committee. EXA in 2020 have done really well, and we are in front of two major events that will influence our appearance around. First of all, we will have a new website. It's just about getting ready, and very soon you will hear much more about it. The platform that you will hear throughout the conference about EU citizen science is not just a project, it's way beyond the project. It is actually a platform that will serve us for many years to come. Hopefully, it will provide us resources about different activities in citizen science, project, and also training material that will allow other people to learn about it. There are also good news that EXA has secured more projects as part of the Horizon 2020 program, which stabilizing the association in terms of being able to continue and work in the coming year. And we also have the upcoming conference of Citizen Science and Sustainable Development Goal in Berlin in October, which will be hybrid, and you should mark it on your calendars. And as you are in the conference, don't miss the following things. There are multiple poster sessions. For example, an opportunity to hear short talks and introduction to a range of projects, and join them with a glass of wine, coffee, beer, whatever suits you. They are both running on Tuesday and Wednesday from 5:30 to 7:30, and really worth joining. And also the lunch break and the network opportunities. We have the shared Zoom channel, and you can find it on the conference website, and then you can learn about them. We have sponsor sessions tomorrow by JICOM and on Wednesday by the EU Citizen Science Project, and the party in the night of Thursday. So let's try and make links online despite of the challenges of carrying this conference. So this session is about two parts. The first part, we're going to talk about encounters of citizen science and human-computer interaction, or interaction design. But then, once we end this, we will switch over to a Zoom session, which is dedicated to the journal Citizen Science Theory and Practice. And please join both of them. So why we are having this fantastic two parts? Well, we have it because our keynote speaker is Professor Jenny Preece. She's a professor and dean emerita of the Information School at the University of Maryland, USA. And anyone who is involved in the field of human-computer interaction heard about it, and a lot of people learned from her books, or the book that she co-created actually with two of her fantastic colleagues. She's also now the editor-in-chief of Citizen Science Theory and Practice, and in quite a while she's been integrating human-computer interaction studies and citizen science. So now over to Jenny and her talk. And because it was recorded to avoid an internet connection problem, please bring your volume to the max so you can hear it well. Over to the talk.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Muki and Rico and conference committee members for your hard work organizing this virtual ECSA conference. Thank you also for inviting me to speak today. Like all of you, I was hoping we would encounter each other in beautiful Italy, in Trieste. Instead, we're scattered across Europe and the world. Wherever you are, I hope you and your families are comfortable and safe. I'm speaking from Vancouver, which is a beautiful city, as you can see. I know some of you, but there are many people that I haven't yet met and who don't know me. So let me tell you a bit about myself, which will help to give some context for this talk. I'm a Canadian British American. I was born in British Columbia, Canada. I spent much of my life in the UK, and I moved to the US in 1996 to take a job at the University of Maryland, where I was also Dean of the Information School for over 10 years. I'm now emerita, and I live in Vancouver. My first degree was in environmental biology. Several years after graduating, I took a job at the British Open University, where I worked on my doctoral degree part-time. This is when I got interested in computing, psychology, and education. So human-computer interaction HCI, was a natural fit for me. I'm passionate about nature and biology, so encountering programs like iSpot Nature online was exciting. Even more thrilling was realizing that I could apply my interaction design skills to citizen science projects. And for the last 12 years, that's what I've been doing. I was proud to feature citizen science in the 5th edition of our widely used co-authored text, Interaction Design Beyond Human-Computer Interaction. Broadly speaking, interaction design encompasses HCI with a strong emphasis on design. Interaction design brings together diverse skills from psychology, computer science, design, engineering, anthropology, and more. My co-authors, Yvonne Rogers from University College London and Helen Sharp from the British Open University, and I describe interaction design as designing interactive products to support the way people communicate and interact via technology in their everyday and working lives. Interaction design is a rapidly growing and changing field. Obviously, I'm not going to give you a lesson on interaction design in this half-hour talk, but I will focus on a couple of key concepts that are particularly relevant to integrating technology into citizen science. One of these is usability testing, a technique to evaluate how well users can interact with a product and whether they like it. According to the Nielsen-Norman Group, a respected interaction design consultancy company, while the reasons for doing usability testing vary by study, they usually include identifying problems in the design of the technology, uncovering opportunities for improvement, and learning about the target user's behavior and preferences. There are several ways of doing usability testing, from watching and talking to users while they interact with technology, to measuring the time it takes to complete a specific task. The other concept, participatory design, also known as co-design, provides a philosophy and methods for involving users in technology design. It also provides a way for citizen science leaders and interaction designers to work together. Participatory design originated in Scandinavia in the late 1960s and early 1970s. At that time, the labor unions pushed for workers to have more influence over their work environments, which were changing due to the introduction of technology. The unions insisted that workers had to be involved in the design of the technology they were expected to use. And participatory design was born. Over the years, participatory design has been adopted and adapted across the world for many different design circumstances, including technology for children, for seniors, for people with emotional and physical challenges, and more recently, for citizen science projects. We all experience the impact of social media, such as Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook in our lives. Social media systems enable us to share ideas, rate products, communicate with friends, receive news, and much more. Citizen science also benefits from the connected world that social media creates. Just as customers on Amazon can share their product ratings, participants in iNaturalist, eBird, and Zooniverse can share opinions about identification of birds, stars, and more. In my early book on online communities, I focused on sociability and usability, important concepts in interaction design. The aim of my talk is to promote interdisciplinary collaboration between citizen science and interaction design. I will start by proposing a participatory design model for coordinating the two. Then I'll talk about 3 encounters involving technology: interaction design and citizen science, the NatureNet project, a project about bees, and Seek for Kids. I'll end with some takeaway messages. When I think about interaction design and citizen science, I see 2 communities that encourage broad participation in terms of participant skills, knowledge, age, ethnicity, race, and gender. Citizen science has a strong reputation for understanding and broadening participation. Indeed, many of the articles in our journal, Citizen Science Theory and Practice, have this focus. Interaction design focuses on the design and usability of technology, sometimes with little attention to the overall citizen science project design. The model that I advocate requires citizen science, represented in blue, and interaction design in red, to work together using participatory design methods to create a single holistic design, shown in purple. Projects that take a holistic approach produce potentially stronger outcomes. Such projects require an interdisciplinary team in which everyone needs to commit to taking the time to understand each other's discipline, skills, and methods. When this occurs, just as when blue and red mix and form purple, new ideas may emerge that lead to exciting new projects. It takes time for members to understand each other and see eye to eye. Some projects never achieve such close integration. Others get part way, as represented by B and C in the center of the slide, and a few manage complete integration. This 3-minute video tells you about a community-driven environmental project called NatureNet.
We often miss the beauty and importance of nature that surrounds us. This project is centered around understanding what happens when we start paying closer attention to plants and animals, waterways, parks, and backyards. Researchers at the University of Maryland, University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and the University of Colorado are working with community partners at 2 local nature centers, the Anacostia Watershed Society and the Reedy Creek Nature Center, to develop technology to support a deeper understanding of and more engagement with local environments.
The tool we are developing is called NatureNet. It helps communities carry out projects in their own local environment.
In Maryland and the District of Columbia, volunteer watershed stewards learn about improving the health of the Anacostia River by creating projects to manage stormwater runoff. NatureNet helps them map, capture, and share information about their projects with each other and the public. At Reedy Creek Nature Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, naturalists develop projects that will help park visitors use their mobile phones to collect data to understand more about nature in the park. Visitors can come in from the trails to see their observations and those from other visitors on a large interactive screen with a kiosk. We are now studying the impact of NatureNet on people's knowledge of local environmental issues and actions. Their understanding of science in their everyday lives, their sense of connection with nature, and their scientific, computational, and technology skills. Are you interested in joining forces with others in your community to better understand and protect local places? Then NatureNet may be the tool you need. What is NatureNet? NatureNet is designed to evolve in response to users who recommend new projects and technology improvements through the Design Ideas feature. We think this is a first, crowdsourcing to guide the evolution of a location-based citizen science platform. And now, we're encouraging its adoption and adaptation in many other outdoor settings, from parks, environmental stewardship programs, to your own backyard. Here's how you can get started. Participants in NatureNet can also influence the design of technology that they use by offering design ideas, which they can input via the app or website. Interested in learning more about the impact of NatureNet? You can read more on our website, download the apps, or check out our research website, research.nature-net.org, where you can track the use of our system through real-time visualizations, and follow our project on social media. We hope that NatureNet will expand and support data collection Any communication around environmental issues that matter to you and your neighborhood. Help make a difference in your local environment. Contribute your nature observations to NatureNet today.
Overall, our team partially saw eye to eye. We were often characterized by the two middle representations, B and C, but we sometimes sat uncomfortably in A and sometimes happily in the purple zone. This large, place-based and virtual project addressed several research questions. One of these focused on how to involve participants in designing the NatureNet technology using participatory design. We collected feedback from participants through interviews, questionnaires, interaction logs, and observations. We were especially interested in crowdsourcing design ideas, as you saw in the video. This is a new form of participatory design in which participants were invited to tell us what features they would like modified or added to NatureNet. We collected a lot of quantitative and qualitative data, and today I will focus on the top 3 lessons that we learned from using participatory design remotely in our project. The first lesson, deeply understand participants' goals, ambitions, and belief systems, which have far-reaching influences on how participants behave and see the world. For example, one educator deeply believed that participants' project experiences should be life-changing. In contrast, another educator focused on getting funding for projects. These goals pervaded every aspect of the work the educators did and their involvement in our project. The second lesson, adapt participatory design methods to fit the needs of a project. We did this by collecting data and design ideas remotely as well as face-to-face. And the third lesson, explain terms carefully. We wrongly assumed that participants would eagerly send us design ideas, so we were surprised when they didn't. When we probed to understand why, we discovered that they didn't understand the term design idea. What kinds of suggestions were appropriate? Did we want to know about small usability problems, or did we want suggestions for new features? They were scared of making suggestions that appeared stupid. Therefore, we had to reassure them that all their suggestions were appropriate and valued. 2 other encounters involving citizen science and technology design, which I found really exciting, involve other researchers' projects. The first is a robotics project led by Shyam Golakota and his doctoral student at the University of Washington in Seattle. These researchers created a tiny camera to enable biologists to come eye to eye with beetles. The camera weighs less than 250 milligrams, yet it scans the environment from side to side when the beetle moves. Without harming the beetle, it captures the beetle's view of its environment. The battery that powers the camera can last for up to 6 hours, and it's only used when the beetle is moving. Encounters between robotics researchers like these, or DIY electronics enthusiasts and entomologists, promise new ways of studying beetle behavior that could be of interest to citizen scientists and benefit from interaction designers' expertise. My second example shows 10-year-old Nina Turin encountering nature using the Seek app. Nina is adding a picture of a fern while walking in Pacific Spirit Park in Vancouver. She likes participating in Seek's data collection challenges. Seek was launched by iNaturalist a year ago. It's a kid's version of iNaturalist. Registration is not required, and data is not collected about participants. Seek does request that location services be turned on so that location data is available for species identifications. privacy is maintained by obscuring the user's location. What intrigues me about Seek is the encounter that occurred behind the scenes when doctoral student Grant Van Horn, an adjunct scientist with iNaturalist, developed the machine learning algorithms to power Seek. These algorithms use iNaturalist's huge database of crowdsourced classified species data to predict the organism in Seek cell phone camera image. When Nina pointed her smartphone at the fern, Seek compared that image to the others in the database from similar locations, and Seek suggested that it's a sword fern. Seek also presented other ferns as possible alternatives. Seek enables kids to contribute data and learn about nature, which they can't do safely in iNaturalist. Using Seek, kids like Nina have fun and maybe develop a passion for citizen science. So that brings me to my 3 takeaway messages that I hope will be useful for you in your own work. Citizen science and interaction design share similar goals and philosophies. Citizen science strives to be a broad tent that welcomes anyone interested in scientific projects. Interaction design has similar goals for improving technology design. They belong together. Participatory design methods can be used in both citizen science and interaction design. Everybody benefits. Citizen scientists get better design technology. Interaction designers get to work on interesting application areas. Finally, my last message: be open to encountering and working with people who have different knowledge, skills, and perspectives than your own. But remember that interdisciplinary work takes time and effort, and enjoy the experience. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for the fantastic talk that you gave us. I hope that the audience have been able to hear it well and now to adjust a bit their speakers down for our talk. So I would like to ask you a few questions following your talk. And the first one is that in your talk, you have covered the links between interaction design and citizen science. So what would you say are the top 2 ideas that people in citizen science should take from human-computer interaction, interaction design, and usability engineering?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you for listening. And I'm sorry the recording was a little bit bumpy in places, but a video within a video conferencing, I guess, is an interesting and new thing to do. And I'd just like to again thank all the conference organizers and Muki and Enrico. So to address Muki's question, I focused on 2 particular things. I focused on usability testing and participatory design, and I think both of them are easily applicable to working in citizen science, and probably a lot of you are already aware of this and you're already doing it. Human-computer interaction really came into its own in the late 70s, but particularly in the early 80s. And at that time, people really focused on usability, on trying to make sure that technology was usable in terms of people could control it, they could make it do what they wanted it to do, they could learn to use it easily, and they could understand the feedback that was presented. So it was usable and controllable and predictable. And at that time, a lot of effort was put both from the the practicing community, and at that time also the research community, on looking at different ways of developing usability evaluation methods. Going forward, we have, within our book, we've actually classified those methods into 3 kinds, and there's a lot of them. There are those that involve users directly, and they involve controlled settings. And this certainly in the early days appealed to many people because it was more scientific. Companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google had large usability labs, and these were huge rooms with separate rooms with one-way mirrors for viewing what was happening. And the rooms were set up to mimic the environments in which people were actually using technology. And so the people who were being tested, and I say at that time tested, we use those words, were actually given specific tasks to do. And they were tracked doing those tasks in terms of how many errors they made, how long they took to complete the task, and these kinds of issues. They also were asked about their satisfaction in using the product. So there was qualitative information collected as well as quantitative, and all the keystrokes were recorded. And a number of the rest of us, who of course didn't have access to these huge facilities that these big companies had, did sort of makeshift but quite successful efforts at doing this. We would set up areas of labs and try and make them as controlled. And indeed, many colleges and universities had their own usability lab. Until a few years ago, we had one at the University of Maryland that we used regularly. More recently, even people like the Nielsen-Norman Group, which has become a very successful consulting agency, has focused much more on the aesthetics of design as well as the usability of the design. And they now spend quite considerable effort on looking at the aesthetics of apps and various applications across the mainframes, not mainframes, of course, but across networks, and also in other areas. So that certainly had a shift in the way usability testing has happened. The other big shift is to focus much more on natural settings. And we have methods which are also called in the wild. And to a certain extent, we've gone out into natural settings often, but more recently we've shifted to looking at things in the wild. And this is particularly helpful when you're thinking about new applications and you're looking for collecting the requirements for those applications, but also for looking at how people are actually using things in real environments, real people, real environments within their real working and home lives. And you get a focus for what actually matters to them and what they focus on. And the third kind of method involves settings in which users are not actually directly involved. And so there are some predictive methods for doing that. Two that are particularly well known are expert evaluation, where typically, again, this is often used in companies and was pioneered by Jacob Nielsen of the Nielsen-Norman Group, where people bring together a set of experts. Often they give them heuristics, but the experts use the technology and then they discuss it and they identify the problems. And this has been a very successful method, particularly in the 1990s. And it was estimated that you needed about five experts to get about 70% of the serious usability issues. Of course, there were sometimes false positives, but that was a useful way of evaluating. And they claimed less expensive, although experts can have quite high fees. Heuristic evaluation was also used, and we discussed this quite a lot in our book, of how you can develop heuristics and use those heuristics, not necessarily having to have experts present, but to evaluate a product. And there are predictive models as well. I would say if you're interested in those, probably one of the best routes actually is to find out within your local college and university whether they're running HCI classes in this area, and most of them are, and to get together with the students, because many undergraduate courses now involve HCI, and one of the absolute fundamentals in our field is usability and usability testing. So that's one way to do it. Another way is our book has a website, id-book.com, and there are a lot of resources there. So you don't need to buy the book. You can go and use those resources, and you can look particularly at the slides that are developed for teaching purposes, and those can be very helpful. Also, other books that are particularly helpful are Ben Schneiderman's book on designing the user interface that was developed before ours. Actually, it's been around a long time and is a real basis for doing human-computer interaction research and development. So those are some of the key methods, and they fit really rather nicely within a participatory design type of model. And I also want to talk a little bit about our own project and how we use that, because I talked about that generally within the recorded sessions. But we did participatory design. Our project started about 5 years ago. So of course, this was pre-COVID. And at that time, we were pretty early on in looking at how you would do participatory design online, but I think it's really relevant to our situation today, where we're going to have to do a lot more testing, certainly in the next year or two, across the network, rather than meeting with people face to face, which is the traditional way of doing participatory design. So we thought to develop this method of collecting design ideas, and we researched it well. And we found a lot of articles actually from within the business community, where business and management had used collecting design ideas to help to design their products. So they put out a very early prototype, and then they invited people to collect design ideas. And I think, interestingly, this demonstrates the difference between different communities, because they had they had a lot more success than we had. We did have success, but we were really surprised, as I mentioned in the video, that people didn't really know what to expect when they were asked to present design ideas. So if you do something like this, I think it demonstrates the importance of not, making assumptions about how people from other areas of work react to particular terms. So as I mentioned in the video, there were many people who were quite concerned about what exactly did we want. Did we want really fairly trivial things like, for example, there were some errors in these early prototypes, or did they want ideas for new functionality? The other thing that I would say that has really, in some senses, changed participatory design, and particularly participatory design when it's done online and doesn't involve people being actually face-to-face and in close community with the people using the software, is that there are so many apps out there now. Many of them are really well designed, and our standards for expectations for well-designed technology have gone up hugely since we started our project 5 years ago. But this was certainly one of the problems that we also ran into, that the people that we were working with at our two nature centers, they were busy, they had lives, they had children and families, they had jobs, and they had limited time. And so often their tolerance for partly designed technology was relatively low. But the overall idea, I think, of using participatory design, and particularly using it in citizen science, I know a lot of you do this already. I know Muki and his group from around the EU projects and other projects are deeply into adapting participatory design for these reasons. So let me just also sidetrack a little bit from there, because one of the things I didn't mention in the talk, which I wanted to keep short, was the value of theory in helping to drive what we did. So we used participatory design as one of our key methods, but we also looked to other theories. And we started off thinking about communities of practice, because our participants were in some ways in a community of practice. But one of the interesting things that we found was that technology designed with a sort of relatively top-down and bottom-up, but with some top-down aspects, was in some ways too structured. And we came across a theory by G called affinity spaces, which I think is quite well known in the education community. And the value of that was that it advocates for a much looser kind of structure and technologies that are far less shaped. So, and that indeed actually spoke to our community. We found a lot of people migrating, of course, onto Facebook and onto email and texting systems. And they did a lot of their project work using those technologies. So that theory, which had started off with gaming and within the education space, which advocated for flexibility of technology, and also, interestingly, flexibility of leadership, that sometimes some people would lead and sometimes others would lead, was actually also extremely helpful. And I should probably stop there, because I know there are probably other questions as well. But I think weaving in theory, which I didn't particularly talk about in the recorded session, with these methods is extremely useful, because it helps you to think about how to use and adapt the method.
Yeah, thank you very much. And another question that is coming very clearly, and you kind of touched on, is the relevance of participatory design even when you don't use technology. So Uta and Jesse and also Natalia were raising the point that in many projects, the code design is kind of an element of the whole project. And indeed, it will be theory that we will need to think about how to merge the general code design with the technological participatory design.
Yeah, I agree. And in the early days of HCI, we used to talk about user-centered design a lot. And though that's still relevant, the sort of focus there is on designing for users. And a big step with participatory design was, or co-design, as you mentioned, Muki, was designing with users. And I think that fits particularly well within the sort of citizen science framework. And I totally agree with you that we can use those sorts of approaches in which we bring in, you know, you could call them stakeholders from across the different projects, participants who are doing different tasks in citizen science, and involve them in the overall design of the projects. Muki, your frameworks for doing citizen science, and also one advocated by Jennifer Shirk and her various colleagues about moving from using people or involving participants to collect data, or rather using of your participants, into moving through working with participants in a collegial and much more equal and as equal as possible way through to planning projects, and also involving them in not just collecting the data, but analyzing the data and working on the results. And if publication is happening, in publishing those results. And I think that's a kind of common theme within interaction design as well. In fact, maybe I think citizen science is probably a little ahead of what's happening in interaction design, but it's certainly the aim that we're going for is really seeing participants as co-designers, not people for whom you design, but people who are actually involved in the design of the technology that they will use. And there are a variety of different techniques, from brainstorming techniques, using whiteboards and sticky boards, sticky notes that help to bring in all voices, which and ideas can then be clustered. And there's online technology for doing that. So I think that's an important point as well. And it doesn't really matter what we kind of say no technology, but I think for many of you in citizen science, although you may not be talking about digital technology, which I'm talking about, you've been using sensors and for a very long time. So I think that's really relevant. Thank you. Unmute. Can you unmute?
Yeah, indeed. Interaction design. That's exactly what we need to do. Notice that we're now completing our session, and we're now moving to the second part of the session when we will talk about the journal Citizen Science Theory and Practice, but also some questions that people have. Come and join us, and it will be an interactive opportunity to join together. Thank you very much, Jenny, for the talk, and thank you all for joining us.
Hey, hey, hey.